Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophets Speak. Today, we continue our study of Divrei Hayamim Bet, that is the second book of Chronicles. We are about to study chapter 14. We just read of the death of Aviyah in chapter 13. Aviyah was the son of Rechavam. Aviyah was the king of the kingdom of Judah, the descendant of David. Aviyah, again, the son of Rechavam. Rechavam, the son of Shlomo or Solomon. Shlomo, the son of David, that's David. And as the kingdom of Yehuda progresses and continues in its development throughout history, which we are going to be reading a summary of the history in, of course, this book of Chronicles. In the north, there is a kingdom which is still under the rule of Yeravam, Jeroboam, who had split from the kingdom of Judah and had begun the kingdom of Israel. And right now, though, we are following the story of what is happening, in the southern kingdom of Yehuda. Now, Aviyah had a son, which we just learned in the last verse of the previous chapter, named Asa, and Asa took over as the king. Now, in the book of Kings, where the same history is recounted, but with very different emphasis and different stories, but the king Aviyah, who is there called Aviyam, was portrayed as a very a wicked king, an evil king, a king that not just dabbled in, but supported idol worship throughout the land and so on. And Aviyam passed the torch to his son Asa, and Asa is going to change the direction of the kingdom of Yehuda in the right direction for a bit of time. And this is something that we find in the southern kingdom of Yehuda, but we never really found in the northern kingdom of Israel. The northern kingdom of Israel was kind of a constant descent into worse and worse corruption, violence, evil, and idol worship, whereas the southern kingdom was not exactly the greatest, but had flashes of light from time to time. And Asa is here portrayed, and what we're about to study together, as a flash of light. Now, if you remember in the historical background, in the days of Rechavam, right, or Rehoboam in English, there was an attack by the Pharaoh Shishak, which we know from both biblical and extra biblical historical sources, from as we mentioned, from inscriptions in the Egyptian monuments and so on. The Pharaoh Shishak, or Sheshonk, which is he's known as in the Egyptian literature, had a raid, an attack on the people of Israel and Yehuda during the time of Rechavam, and he took a lot of booty. Took most of the gold and treasures of the temple and the king's house, and by that Rechavam paid him off to leave the capital alone, but much devastated with much loss of wealth, and many of the cities were raided and so on. So this pattern of being raided by Egyptian raiding parties is one that was ongoing with Egypt, and not exactly asserting its sovereignty, not absorbing the Israelite states into their politically, so to speak, but subjugating them and subduing them and showing who's boss. So we'll come up with something similar in this chapter as well. But here we go. Let's read. Vayas asa hatov v'hay hashar v'hinei Adonai Elohav. And Asa did that which is good, and that which is yashar literally means straight. So meaning straight, proper, appropriate in the eyes of God, the Lord his God. Whenever it uses the term his God, it's not meant in a way to be exclusive and say it's his God and no one else's God. His meaning that to him, God was a guiding light. That was something that a God that this person we're referring to, in this case, Asa, had a personal relationship with. So it's quite a compliment. So Vayosar es mizbechos hanechor v'habamos. He removed the foreign altars and high places. Vayeshaberet hamatzevot, and he destroyed the matzevot. These are the monuments put up for um, idolatrous purposes. Vayigada et asherim, and he cut down the Asherah trees, is the way it's traditionally understood. Um, some form of tree or wooden pillars that were used as in idol worship. He chopped them down. Vayomer Yehuda, and he said to the people of Yehuda, and he instructed them as follows: Lidrosh. The word lidrosh, I'm going to talk about in a little more detail, but simply it means to search out. Et Adonai Elohei Avosehem, the Lord, the God of their forefathers, Vila'asot, and to do HaTorah v'HaMitzvah, the teachings of the Torah and the mitzvah and the commandments that God had told them. Now, this word lidrosh finds itself in many contexts throughout the Tanakh, throughout the Bible, and its simple meaning is to seek out, to search out, um, um, and but it specifically means to seek out, uh, to find out. It's a seeking that leads to action. In other words, to search to find out what to do. Like when one is in a situation where he or she does not know what the next step should be, one seeks out advice. Is one is doresh in order to discover what the path should be. So when it says here to seek out God, it specifically refers to that. I'll just give a few examples. First of all, one which is important is in Devarim, in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 5, where it says, L'shichno sidrishu uvasa shama. In order to search out God, one should come to the place where God rests, and there it's referring to the temple, right? And come there and then learn what kind of action to take, right? In Ezra, in 10:16, of chapter 10, verse 16, in the book of Ezra, when they had a conundrum, they had a problem, what to do about the situation of intermarriage that they were dealing with. They said, "Lidariosh hadavar." The people sat lidariosh to examine the thing in order to decide what to do. And the most famous, probably, verse where this same word is used, lidrosh, darash, is in Micha, in the book of Micah, chapter 6, verse 8, probably one of the most famous verses in the entire Bible, and that is, Umo Hashem Elokecha doresh mimecha. What is it that the Lord your God, doresh, desires from you? What is he seeking from you? Right? Ki im asos mishpat. He only wants you to do justice, and to walk humbly with God, and so on. So again, we see what is it that God seeks from us. He's not seeking us for some um, for some uh, intellectual or even spiritual enlightenment, which sometimes it livakesh sometimes mean that in a similar sense. But the word lidrosh is specifically a reference to action. God wants, right, some sort of action. So when therefore this verse 3 here is an excellent example of the point I'm trying to make. He says to Judah, Lidrosh, to come to search out God, Vila'asos, and do HaTorah v'HaMitzvah. Okay, so the bottom line is that what Asa is asking his people to do is to come to the temple and do what God wants. This is crucial because this term, Lidrosh, the reason why I've been emphasizing it, I'm sorry for not saying this a little earlier, is that it comes up over and over again throughout Divrei Hayamim, throughout the book of Chronicles. That it over and over again comes up that this term, and I want to emphasize that the importance of it is it's seeking God because God wants action. He wants us to do things, most notably the mitzvot, the commandments, and the Torah, the teaching. So Vayasar Mikol Arei Yehuda et Habamot v'et Hachamonim, he removed all the high places and the sun pillars, these pillars that were devoted to worshiping the sun. Vatishko Tamam Lachal Lefanav, and the kingdom was quiet before him. In other words, he peacefully led without rebellion, without strife. And that was the reward for the people devoting themselves to Torah and mitzvah. When the people are devoted in the proper cause, you have everyone united in purpose. You have a community, you have a kingdom which has its path set before them. You have a resulting peace. Vayivan are Mitzura Yehuda, and he took this opportunity to build up fortified cities in Yehuda. Presumably, he's fortifying them against a potential Egyptian raid, which we're going to see in a minute. Kishak Tahar, because this was an ongoing problem of the time. Kishak Taharetz, because the land at this time was quiet. So while the time is quiet, now's the time to prepare for the next oncoming onslaught. During these years, there is no war, because God gave him some peace. Vayomer Yehuda, and he said to the people of Yehuda, Nivne et harim eila, let's build up these cities, v'nasev chomo migdalim, and let's surround them in walls and towers, to lasayim urichim, doors and bolts to lock them. Odenu haaretz lifanenu, because at least now we still have the land in front of us. We have control over the land and the territory. Let's use this time to prepare. Ki dorashnu es Adonai Eloheinu, because we have searched out the Lord our God, Dorashnu, we have searched him out. Vayonach lanu misaviv, and as a result of our searching him, remember, searching and acting in the way that he wants us to act and doing the things he wants us to do. Vayonach lanu misaviv, he gave us some respite, some peace from all of the surrounding peoples. Vayivnu vayatzlichu, and they did this, they built it up, and they were successful in their building. They did a good job of building up these cities. Asa built up an army. Not only did he build up his physical defenses, he also built up his military organizational defense. People that carried shields and spears, 300,000 from the tribe of Yehuda, of Judah, Umi Binyamin, and the tribe of Benjamin, which its territory was engulfed within the southern kingdom, and Binyamin became a integral part of the southern kingdom of Yehuda. No say Magain Vidorche Keshes, people that carried shields and used bows. So apparently there were many archers from the tribe of Binyamin. Masayim Ushmonim Elef, 280,000 Kol Eile Gibori Chayil. These were men of might and strength. So he had at his disposal, according to these numbers, at least almost 600,000 soldiers, armed and ready for the defense of the kingdom of Yehuda. Vayetze Alehem, and of course, they weren't getting ready for nothing. They were getting ready for the next Egyptian attack. And we're going to be introduced to a new character here for a brief few verses. Vayetze Aleim Zerach HaKushi, Zerach the Cushite. Now, Cush is often translated as Ethiopia. The kingdom of Cush, we know, is located in what's mostly modern Sudan, maybe a little bit of Ethiopia too. It was south of Egypt. Now, at this time in Egypt, we heard of Shishak, or Pharaoh Shishak, as he's known in the Bible, and his attacks against Rechavam, the grandfather of Asa. That was only a few years prior, because the intervening reign of Aviyah was only for 3 years. And his exploits in the land of Israel. Shishak had a son who was Osar Khan the first, the Pharaoh Osar Khan. Now, this family was Nubian, meaning they came from, Libyan. I'm sorry, I made a mistake there. They were Lubim, they were Libyans. And we'll see in a future chapter how the Libyans were important, because they were mixed into this crowd here of attackers. Now, they had, through various means, had taken over the pharaohship of Egypt. So Egypt was a kingdom that had included and had exerted its strength and hegemony over surrounding nations, which would be the nation of Lubia, right, which is today modern Libya. so to its west, and Cush, which is to its south. And Cush is also often called Nubians. Now, so these, and they were all part of the Egyptian empire, and from among them, leaders arose that eventually became Pharaoh, and Shishak and his house and his son, his house, his family, including his son Osarkon, was one of them. Zerach HaKushi, although scholars do debate this, it seems to be pretty much the consensus that Zerach HaKushi was a leader, a Kushite leader, who was told by Osarkon to lead this raid. So he was a leader of a Kushite leader. Now his name Zerach is curious because Zerach is a Semitic, a Hebrew name, which we are familiar with as one of the sons of Yehuda himself, the forefather of the tribe of Judah, right? Peretz and Zerach, if you go back to the book of Genesis, Zerach is a clearly Semitic name. Hebrew name. So how this Cushite ended up with the Hebrew name is a subject of debate and discussion. But regardless, he is identified here as an Ethiopian or a Cushite, a Sudanese, if you will, even though, of course, that's quite anachronistic because the country of Sudan did not exist at this time. But somewhere from around there, he led a group of Egyptians, B'chayel Elef Alofim, with 1,000,000 soldiers, Umarkavot Shlosh Meot, and 300 chariots by Avoad Moresha. And his attack, he attacked the southern parts of Judah, and he approached towards Jerusalem, and he reached as close as the town of Maresha. Maresha is well known today. Maresha is going to pop up many times throughout Tanakh, and including here. And here that we're at nowadays, we call the town is called Beit Gurin, a famous national park, a very worthwhile place to visit should you find yourself in the area. Vayetze. So Asa's preparations of preparing his soldiers and his armies and his fortresses was well done. So Vayetze Asa lifanav vayarchu milchama begei tzifata l'moresha. So Asa came out to greet him in war, and the battlefield was laid out in the valley of Tzifata, which is next to Maresha. Vayikra Asa, and this valley can be seen to this day. Vayikra Asa el Adonai Elohav, and Asa called out to the Lord his God. Vayomar, and he said, Adonai, God, ein imcho la'azor bein rav le'ein koach, right? Don't you have the strength to help us, or to help people, whether or not they are the majority or the minority, whether or not they have the strength or they have less strength, whether they are more armed or less armed? In other words, God, everything is in your hands. Just because we are a smaller army and we don't have the fancy chariots that the Cushites have, you have the strength to help us. Azreinu, help us, Adonai Eloheinu, ki alacha nishanu, because we have relied upon you. Uvashimcha banu, and it is in your name that we have come al ha'amon hazeh, upon this thing. We are fighting this to defend our way of life. This is a crucial idea which is going to be repeated over and over again throughout Divrei Hayamim as we learn how the chronicler presents the history. We stick with God. We have a purpose in what we do. We will fight together and we will win together. We are united in purpose, and that purpose is to establish the ideas, the teachings, the way of life of God, the only God, of monotheism in general and specifically. So you have it is in this light that we fight this war. We don't fight it for ourselves. We don't fight it for our glory, for the house of anyone. We're fighting it for God, Adonai Eloheinu, the Lord our God. Atah, you al yatzorim enosh, right? Do not allow human beings to mess up your plans, right? So Asa realizes human beings can be, and many times are, the enemy of God's plans. We are standing up to defend your plans for this world. Please help us. So here we have very specifically Asa calling upon God, not calling upon his own greatness, not calling upon other human beings for help, but looking towards God, uniting the people together and leading the fight. And the result was in verse 11, "Vayigof Adonai et hakushim lifnei Asa v'lifnei Yehuda vayanusu hakushim," and God struck the Cushites in front of Asa and Yehuda, and the Cushites retreated and ran. Vayir defame Asa, and Asa was able to chase them via Sherimo and the entire army that was with him, Ad Gror, all the way down as far south as Gror, which is well down into the Negev desert. Vayipol mikushim le'en lehem michya, and the Cushites were falling because they did not have support. They were running out of supplies as they were on the run, retreating from before Asa's attack, counterattack. Because they had been broken down in front of God and in front of the camp which represented God by Yis'u Shalol Harbei Me'od, and they carried much booty they took from the Cushites. Now, interestingly, in the Chazal tradition, in our tradition, the rabbinic tradition, when Zerach's predecessor Shishak led the raid during the time of Rechavam and took all the gold and so on, the legend has it that the Ark of the Covenant, was among the gold riches which was given by Rechavam to Shishak in order to save Jerusalem, and it was part of the booty that Shishak took back with him to Egypt. The legend has it that here, Asa, among the gold that Asa recaptured from Zerach was the ark and other gold treasures from the temple. So Asa was able to rebuild the gold, or bring the gold back to the temple, and so on. That is the tradition. And what's interesting here is that, this all would fit into the narrative, the historical narrative, if we're trying to place this extra biblically into the history books. This is how all of this story would fit in. I know there's a lot of articles and debates about this among the historians and archaeologists, etc. But this is more or less the consensus in terms of the history that I'm giving you. Obviously, those that want to read more opinions are welcome to do so. Vayaku es kol he'orim sevivot Gerar, and all of the cities surrounding Gerar were struck down, right? Ki haya fachad Adonai aleihem, because the fear of God was upon them. Es kol he'orim, all of the cities, ki vizor rabah, because there was a lot of wealth and riches among these towns. And Vagam Ohale Miknehiku, and they also were able to. There were many shepherds, many encampments. There were not necessarily towns, but groups of people that had a lot of sheep. By Yishbu Tzon Larov, and they were captured a lot, many sheep and camels of Gemalim by Yashubu Yerushalayim, and they returned triumphantly to Jerusalem. So this was absolutely a defensive war, started as a defensive war to defend Jerusalem, because the people were able to unify themselves and unite and ward off the attack. They ended up with a lot of riches, a lot of bounty, a lot of wealth. This ends. So here we have Asa leading the people on the right path. We have a bright light in the darkness that surrounds the rest of a lot of the history that we're going to be and have been studying. This concludes chapter 14. Thank you so much for studying chapter 14 together with me. Looking forward to studying chapter 15 and, of course, the entire wonderful book of Chronicles that we are studying together. Have a wonderful day.